Hi there! Now that I've been able to extensively playtest Haru, it's finally time for an in-depth character guide. I know I'm late and everyone's attention is on the upcoming patch, but hear me out. A lot of testing and some number crunching were required to figure out the nuances of her kit. Haru is easy to play but hard to master, since Xizian's card descriptions are notoriously unreliable and imprecise. If you're interested in an analysis of her cards and how Xizian's damage calculation works more broadly, this is the video for you. Without further ado, let's get into it. Haru is a single target focused DPS character who excels at doing isolated instances of burst damage. She is best suited against targets that punish you for doing multi-hit attacks and specializes at taking down shielded opponents due to her pulverize effect. The core of her deck is Anchor Shot, a single target nuke that most of her other abilities are there to set up. The base version of the card includes a ramp up that increases the skill's multiplier additively by 60% with each use up to 5 times. All versions of the card have Pulverize, which grants 20% bonus damage against shields. This is a final multiplicative modifier like weakness damage, meaning whatever bonuses you stack up for the card are then multiplied by 20%. Don't worry if the details of this are lost on you, I will elaborate on how damage modifiers are applied in Xizian as we go along. 3 of the epiphanies maintain the ramp up effect, adding only minor variations. To start simple, her most basic upgrade simply increases both the base multiplier and the additive bonus. Here, upon the first use, the card has a final multiplier of 456%, which includes 2 additive and 2 multiplicative bonuses from her partner and gear. The card's base multiplier is 320 though. After having used Anchor Shot twice, it has accumulated a bonus of 180%, which is added onto the final multiplier that is now at 636%. After a few more turns, the bonus stacks are maxed out for a total increase of 90 times 5, meaning 450%. The final card multiplier of almost 1300% here is partly due to Haru's own multiplicative buffs, amounting to 110%, and the additive bonus of 450%. I'm ignoring some minor other bonuses for simplicity. The important takeaway here is that the 450% is added after multiplication of other bonuses. If it were directly added onto the base multiplier, Anchor Shot would reach almost 2000% in this example. Understanding this detail is key to determining which upgrades optimize her damage output. Since everything in Haru's kit revolves around Anchor Shot, one of its upgrades targets the availability of the skill. It has a slightly lower base and stack multiplier but comes with the utility of creating up to 2 copies of itself during a fight. What's important to know is that each copy of Anchor Shot tracks its own stacks. Upon the card's first use, a copy is put into the draw pile. It duplicates the state of the first card after its use, meaning it is created with 1 stack of the 60% bonus damage. Upon the second use, another copy is generated, this time with 2 stacks of the bonus damage. Now the deck contains 3 copies of Anchor Shot, each with their separate stack counters. Here, Haru has 1 Anchor Shot in hand with 2 stacks for 120% additive bonus damage and another copy with only 1 stack for 60% bonus damage. By using this epiphany, you're increasing the availability of Anchor Shot while simultaneously extending the ramp up of its multiplier. Since Haru has another card that makes Anchor Shot more available, it is not optimal to copy Anchor Shot, whether through this epiphany or via the Chaos mode. The better alternative would be this upgrade, which returns Anchor Shot to hand once per turn when scoring a critical hit. Below 100% crit rate, this may be less reliable than having multiple copies in deck, but it ensures that the build-up of the stack count occurs only once and at an increased speed. Of course, benefiting from this effect requires a lineup that supplies sufficient AP, since you need to pay the card's 2 AP cost twice within a round. There's more to be said about this upgrade, but we'll first have to explore Haru's other cards to fully establish the pros and cons. That said, Haru's remaining 2 Anchor Shot epiphanies change the card's mechanics more significantly. This upgrade makes Anchor Shot discard all of her teammates' cards in hand for a damage bonus of 100% per discarded card. It comes with the highest base multiplier among the options, but also at an increased cost of 3 AP. Since discarding your hand isn't always ideal, it now also has a retain tag so that you can wait for the right moment before you play Anchor Shot. Note that unlike all other damage bonuses, the discard effect is not visually added onto the skill's final multiplier. Instead, it shows up in parentheses, asking you to do the math in your head. Here we have 4 cards in hand. Anchor Shot shows a multiplier of 450%, onto which 400% will be added. By playing 1 card, the additive bonus is reduced to 300%. after another card it is down to 200%. As we attack, Anchor Shot still shows a multiplier of 450%, though the final multiplier should be 650%. When repeating the move with 4 cards in hand and the same multiplier of 450, you can see though that the damage is higher. The difference between the two critical hits amounts to about 300 damage or 31%, which is identical to the relative difference between the multipliers. While it's good to know that the effect is working properly, it's worth noting that the discard bonus is again additive, just like the stacking bonus from the other upgrades. However, its theoretical ceiling is higher, up to 9 stacks at most for 900% bonus damage, though practically this is hard to achieve. Finally, this epiphany abandons all additive bonuses for Anchor Shot and instead grants it the combo effect for an additional hit upon activation. Combo activates when a card with the same attribute, meaning from a Justice character, is played before Anchor Shot. The card text doesn't provide any hints as to whether the combo is active, so instead you have to pay attention to the visual cue around the card. As Mika makes her play, you can see how Anchor Shot assumes a golden glow, signifying that it's ready to unleash its damage twice. Note that Haru's own cards also count towards the activation condition, since they are from the Justice attribute as well. This makes her independent of blue teammates, even when using this version of Anchor Shot. Even better, Haru's Anchor Pointer, which draws Anchor Shot from the deck, counts towards activating the combo, even though Anchor Shot wasn't visually in your hand while you activated the card. Other teammates with different attributes don't count, so make sure that you pay attention to the glow. Note that this epiphany has the lowest base multiplier of all the options, but since it hits twice, it effectively starts out with higher damage than everything besides the discard variant, requiring much less of a setup or ramp up time. Before concluding which upgrade is optimal and in what situation, we first have to explore the rest of Haru's kit though. Anchor Pointer is Haru's best way to increase Anchor Shot's availability. It draws Anchor Shot from anywhere in the deck at 0 cost. The epiphanies can go two ways, either improving Anchor Shot's damage or adding utility via retain or retrieve. Note that the first upgrade loses the ability to draw the card and instead applies retrieve to all Anchor Shots in deck, and not just the ones in hand. This is designed for the combined use with Anchor Shot's self-copying epiphany. Once Anchor Shot is used, it returns to the hand and consumes the retrieve effect. This speeds up the stacking at the expense of reliability. Of course, retrieve can also be useful when you lack AP to play Anchor Shot when drawn, sending it back to your hand for the next round. With a battery like Mika, you may be able to set up for potentially lethal nuke turns with multiple buffed Anchor Shots in hand. That said, I don't see much benefit of adding retrieve versus directly drawing the card. As previously noted, the self-copying variant of Anchor Shot is suboptimal due to the independent damage stacks, so doubling down on the mechanic with this variant of Anchor Pointer is not recommended. The next two epiphanies are fairly similar, aimed at providing more utility. The first variant adds retain to the drawn Anchor Shot so that you can delay its use when you're out of AP. After drawing Anchor Shot this way, you can practically keep it in hand for as long as it takes to get your desired setup. This upgrade favors longer fights, in particular when your lineup doesn't excel at cycling through your deck quickly. Note that the discard epiphany of Anchor Shot already grants its retain, thereby making this Anchor Pointer variant obsolete. Never combine these two cards in your deck. That said, I've been offered this epiphany when I had chosen the discard version of Anchor Shot. Perhaps the devs created a secret alternative to avoid the aforementioned pitfall? Regardless, a stack of Resolve which increases the shield gain by 20% is not useful for Haru, so I just ignore that this version of Anchor Pointer seems to exist. The second variant adds retrieve to itself, which can be leveraged in two ways. If you're out of AP for the round, you can end your turn and let Anchor Pointer come back to your hand to draw Anchor Shot next round. This functionality would be similar to the retain effect from the other epiphany, though restricted to delaying for only one turn. Another use would be to draw Anchor Shot, play it, then draw it from the graveyard a second time via the returned Anchor Pointer. This scenario suffers from the same limitations as other setups that enable multiple uses of Anchor Shot by requiring a lot of AP though. Note that the retrieve effect gets consumed after one use, so the increased flexibility of this epiphany comes at the cost of strictly limiting the number of uses you get out of it. Here, the deck includes 2 copies of Anchor Pointer, and both of them are essentially reverted back to their base versions once retrieve is triggered. Unless you're building a deck specifically for highly turn-limited content like Dimensional Twilight, I'd best avoid this upgrade. The last two epiphanies are geared towards amplifying Anchor Shot's output and are generally your best options. The first variant grants the drawn Anchor Shot a multiplicative 20% damage bonus for one turn. To demonstrate, here Anchor Shot has a multiplier of 348%. An additive bonus would increase the multiplier to 368. The base multiplier of this version is 280%, so 20% multiplicative bonus damage amounts to an increase of 56%. Once drawn via Anchor Pointer, the multiplier is indeed raised to 404%. While not a massive damage increase, it is a universally useful effect, and you can never go wrong with choosing more DPS. The final variant grants the drawn Anchor Shot 25% bonus critical rate. This obviously synergizes with Anchor Shot's Crit Epiphany, which once per turn returns the card back to hand upon a successful critical hit. When using that version of Anchor Shot, you should also pick this upgrade for Anchor Pointer. Then, irrespective of which Anchor Shot you're running, you're likely to benefit from this upgrade for the potential damage boost. Critical damage is a final modifier of your skill damage and contributes more significantly to your damage than other bonuses that only modify the skill multiplier. Therefore, ensuring that you crit more often is an effective way of improving your DPS. That said, having too low of a crit rate diminishes what this bonus does for you, as you'd still be missing a lot of crits. When deciding between the 20% guaranteed damage bonus versus the 25% crit chance, you're best off choosing the crit variant when your crit rate is neither too low nor too high. Assuming that exceeding 75% crit rate is unlikely, you can't go wrong with this upgrade outside of the early game. Since we're on the topic of boosting Haru's damage, let's continue with her buffs. Lift Anchor is a zero-cost card, providing a 70% damage bonus to all Anchor Shots in hand, while increasing their cost by 1 AP. Without testing, you wouldn't know whether this applies in an additive or multiplicative manner. Here, Anchor Shot has a multiplier of 370%. If Lift Anchor were an additive buff, the 70% bonus would increase the multiplier to 440%. If it were multiplicative, it would add 70% of 300% base multiplier, which amounts to a bonus of 210%. That is a considerable difference and important to figure out when deciding how to spend your AP. Once Lift Anchor is used, we see that the buff is indeed multiplicative. Now, would you expect Lift Anchor to include the additional damage stacks of Anchor Shot in its buff application? In other words, does the buff only apply to Anchor Shot's base multiplier, or does it increase as you gain more stacks? Here, Anchor Shot has been used twice for a 120% increase to its multiplier, now at 490%. If Lift Anchor were to include this in its calculation, you'd gain 70% of this 120% increase as bonus damage, which is to say an increase of 84% over the previous 210%. Once we buffed up, we see that this is not how Lift Anchor works. It will only calculate the damage bonus from the base multiplier of Anchor Shot. This is worth keeping in mind when deciding which version of Anchor Shot to choose. On that note, remember that the discard variant of Anchor Shot has an increased cost. When combined with Lift Anchor, the card's cost is raised to 4 AP, making AP restoration from someone like Mika mandatory. Then, Charge Energy's base version grants Haru's attacks 30% bonus damage for one turn at the cost of 1 AP. Conveniently, both this card and Lift Anchor have a retain tag, allowing you to delay their use for the right moment. The epiphanies all offer slight variations of the card's theme, though the middle one changes the buff's behavior from a multiplicative to an additive damage bonus. Given CZN's imprecise descriptions, you'd be forgiven for not realizing this difference. For the sake of brevity, I will spare you much of my testing and compare this epiphany to the highest multiplicative bonus. This variant provides a 50% damage increase for a single attack only. Whether this is the best choice for your deck depends on what you're going for, but before continuing that thought, let's first establish how the buffs work. Here, we have the crit version of Anchor Shot with a base multiplier of 300%. While the card currently holds 3 stacks of bonus damage, we know by now that Haru's buffs don't take those into account. Instead, we can expect the multiplier to increase by 150 if this version of Energy Charge is indeed multiplicative. After using the skill, the damage is at 680% as predicted. When chained with Lift Anchor, we get another 70% for a total multiplicative bonus of 120% of the 300% base multiplier. The next example uses the discard version of Anchor Shot with a higher base multiplier of 350%. Now, the 50% bonus from Energy Charge grants an increase of 175. Change with Anchor Shot once more, we've gained an increase of 420, 60 more than in the previous example. Hopefully, it is becoming clear by now that these types of buffs become more effective the higher the base multipliers. This is worth keeping in mind when choosing which versions of Anchor Shot and Energy Charge to combine. As a side note, make upgrading the potentials that boost the base multipliers a priority. This node grants a permanent multiplicative increase for Haru's Anchor Shot damage, which then gets further amplified by her buffs. Moving on, here Anchor Shot has a multiplier of 434%. When using this version of Charge Energy, we're granted 70% bonus damage for each of Haru's cards in hand, excluding Energy Charge itself. As we use the buff, we gain Charge Energy plus 4, which lists in the status window a bonus of 280%. As you can see, Anchor Shot is now at 714%, making this buff indeed additive. Whether this additive bonus is better than the multiplicative one depends on the number of Haru's cards in hand, as well as the base multiplier of the Anchor Shot Epiphany. Since both Energy Charge and Lift Anchor have a retained tag, getting at least 2 stacks for 140% bonus damage should be the worst case scenario, and the buff's potential increases with Haru's deck size. In this example, we have 4 Haru cards in hand. Assuming we didn't have enough AP to use both buffs, is Energy Charge or Lift Anchor the better choice? Charge Energy provides 3 stacks for an additional bonus of 210%. Lift Anchor grants 70% of 280%, for a bonus of 196%. As a rule of thumb, you can expect Lift Anchor and 3 stacks of Energy Charge to be about the same, so you don't have to pull out the calculator each time. Likewise, this version of Energy Charge is comparable to the multiplicative variants at about 2 stacks or 140% additive bonus damage, and outperforms the alternatives at 3 stacks and beyond. Now of course, it may not be all about damage. For instance, this variant offers bonus Tenacity Break, and this one provides utility via an extra card draw at the expense of amplification. Before concluding with my build recommendations, let me briefly address Haru's final card, Power Charge. Unlike her other skills, Power Charge is more intended to compensate for Haru's specialization on single target damage. One noteworthy variant provides 30% bonus damage per target hit for the next attack, making it the only upgrade worth using in a deck geared towards maximizing Anchor Shot's damage. For multi-target fights that have high HP targets, for instance with bosses who summon adds, you would potentially have a decent method of boosting Anchor Shot. This damage bonus isn't turn-based, meaning it remains until you choose to make an attack. However, it is additive, so for pure single target fights, the bonus is negligible. The other upgrades are more geared towards increasing Power Charge's output, among which my favorite is this variant, which provides unconditional weakness damage. With this, you can build an AoE-centered deck for Haru that prioritizes duplicating and buffing Power Charge while ignoring Anchor Shot. Of course, if your roster is well built and you have an AoE stage clearer for each element, this would offer the greatest benefit, but as of making this guide, we're still a while away from such an advanced account state. Here, buffed up via her partner and Charge Energy, Power Charge can reach impressive multipliers. Alternatively, Vulnerability application from a teammate works just as well. When combined with the Charge Energy variant that provides bonus Tenacity Shred, she can also become an incredible breaker. Building an AoE deck for Haru is straightforward. If you want to make her your generic stage clearer irrespective of elemental typing, choose the attack weakness variant of Power Charge and try to duplicate it in your deck. If you manage to do that, and assuming your lineup generates enough AP for multiple Power Charges within a round, you're best off going with a Charge Energy variant that applies to all attacks. The best option to maximize your damage is the additive 70% bonus attack per Haru card in hand. Alternatively, if you want to prioritize Stability Break for a single attack, you can choose this Epiphany that maximizes a multiplicative damage bonus alongside the additional Stability Shred. This makes more sense when Haru's deck is thinned out and you're either cycling cards quickly or have other damage dealers on your lineup. If you're building a deck specifically against enemies who are weak to the Justice element, you can instead go with the combo variant that reduces Power Charge's cost. This makes spamming the card easier, but relies again on having multiple copies of it. Keep in mind though that this cancels her synergy with Celestial card users. The rest of Haru's abilities don't really matter in this setup. Since deleting too many cards is impractical, you may want to opt for the discard variant of Anchor Shot. It comes with a retain effect, so you're essentially holding onto it and lift anchor until you can make use of them, or simply to increase the number of Haru cards in hand for the stacking 70% bonus damage from charge energy. That said, let's proceed with building a deck that optimizes Haru's anchor shot damage. There are a lot of conditionals when determining the strengths of each card, so I approach this from a standpoint of maximizing anchor shot's damage multiplier. This graph compares the different versions of anchor shot using buffs from lift anchor and either one of the two strongest versions of charge energy. The y-axis ranks the different combinations before and after their build-up. For instance, crit superscript 0 denotes the crit variant at 0 stacks, while plus 70% times 2 denotes 2 stacks of charge energy's additive damage bonus. Times 50% refers to the multiplicative bonus of charge energy instead. Discard superscript 0 refers to a situation in which no cards can be discarded. The bottom half of the graph includes all anchor shot variants before they ramp up, which is to say at the start of battle when you haven't built any stacks, or in the case of the discard version, when you don't have other cards in hand. Note that the combo variant of anchor shot is only ranked in the upper half, as it doesn't require any build-up, and there's no point in assuming that you use it without activating the combo effect. It should come as no surprise that the crit variant ranks lowest as it offers utility over damage. I simply included it to gauge the trade-off, but of course if you're able to provide enough AP for the repeated use of anchor shot, it can be a decent option. Keep in mind though that the buff from lift anchor only applies to the first use of anchor shot. When it returns from the graveyard upon a successful crit, the buff is gone. Note that I'm never assuming more than 5 discardable cards for the discard version of anchor shot, though theoretically it would be possible to achieve more when you have team members that draw a lot of cards like Cassius, or those who create cards, such as Renoa or Chiron. In an ideal setup, this variant would outrank the rest, albeit with considerably more effort. That said, the highest ranking version of anchor shot is the combo variant. Even though it has the lowest base multiplier, its double hit essentially benefits from the damage bonuses twice. Given that the combo version doesn't require any setup or build-up, while also being less AP demanding, you can expect a considerable DPS advantage over the alternatives. With respect to charge energy, as mentioned before, the 140% additive bonus, meaning with 2 stacks, is comparable to the multiplicative bonus of 50%. Therefore, when having at least 3 of Haru's cards in hand, the stacking additive bonus outperforms the alternatives. To summarize, the combo variant of anchor shot requires the least amount of setup, while simultaneously offering the greatest damage in most situations. You want to combine this with the stacking additive damage bonus of charge energy. So long as you have at least 2 other Haru cards in hand, which should be lift anchor and anchor shot at the very least, it will never be worse than the other options. Of course, it doesn't provide any other benefits such as bonus card draws or extra tenacity break, so adjust according to your priorities. Then, your best choice for anchor pointer is the version that offers 25% bonus crit rate upon drawing anchor shot. If your crit rate is still very low, or perhaps at some point exceeding 75%, you could choose the 20% bonus damage alternative instead. However, critical damage is the most impactful modifier, so ensuring you crit more often will likely improve your DPS more significantly. Anchor Pointer is the card you'd ideally want to duplicate in your deck, though having a copy of Charge Energy is also great. Copying Anchor Shot offers the least benefit. Finally, you can try to grab the Power Charge upgrade that grants more bonus damage for your Anchor Shot turns. Its value is dependent on the number of targets, but it is the only option that synergizes with a deck built around maximizing Anchor Shot's damage. If you want to strictly optimize a deck for single target boss battles, you may want to consider removing Power Charge from the deck, of course in addition to her basic cards. If you're facing opponents who punish multi-hit attacks, your next best option is the discard version of Anchor Shot. Making it work is more effortful though, so you'd be forgiven for choosing one of these stacking versions instead, so long as you avoid the self-copying variant. If you have the right units to make it work and the dedication to see it through, discarding can outperform comboing. An ideal turn would first require 3 or more Haru cards in hand to benefit from charge energy, at least 4 AP to use the buffed Anchor Shot, and 6 other cards to discard. This will require an AP battery, and potent deck cycling or characters who summon cards to your hand. With that, you're almost ready to receive your diploma in Harutology. There's only a bit more to go through before graduation. Haru's ego skill is aligned with her role as a single target nuker. It costs 6 EP and has a base multiplier of 350%. Then, a secondary effect increases the multiplier additively by 50% for each buff that applies to Haru. Here, 3 buffs increase the multiplier by 150%. In this status window, you can see that all buffs are taken into account that don't show the picture of another teammate. That is to say, buffs like counter attack, which apply to one character specifically, don't contribute towards her ego skill's effect. Note that generic buffs like morale also apply to ego skills, so here the final multiplier is 520% for a total of 650% due to weakness damage. With respect to Haru's own buffs, charge energy contributes 1 stack, but its effect only applies to her cards. Lift Anchor doesn't do anything for her ego skill, since it directly applies to her anchor shot cards in hand without showing up as a status. That said, 6 EP is a big ask for an ego skill, and a raw nuke without bonus effects may rarely be a priority. Given its potentially high multiplier, it could become a decent finisher move, especially with higher crit stats, but in the early to mid game I often found the cost to be outweighing the benefit. Moving on to Haru's partner options. The 3-star partner provides up to 16% bonus attack and a 16% multiplicative damage bonus at the start of battle. This buff is surprisingly strong, but unfortunately only applies to the first turn. It is a decent placeholder until you obtain a higher rarity weapon though. The 4-star partner Ritoshka is intended for strikers like Haru with high cost cards. It grants an additive damage bonus of 10% for attack cards costing 2 or more, and further offers a stacking additive damage bonus based on the total cost of all attack cards. Let's demonstrate how this works in practice. When drawing your hand, Construction Support, which is the name of the partner's effect, tallies up the cost of all attack cards in hand. Here, this yields only 1 stack for 5% additional card damage. When you're not making an attack, the bonus carries over to the next round, where it adds up with the newly gained stacks. In this round, the total cost of the attack cards is 7. So now Haru gained a total of 40% bonus damage for the next attack card she plays. Once we attack, Construction Support is consumed, and the stacking begins anew in the next round. The effect can stack infinitely, so for lineups that don't quickly cycle Haru's cards, you will get some decent value out of this. The ego skill grants 3 morale for 1 turn, which equates to a team-wide damage bonus of 60%. For just 2 points it's not a bad effect, though again it is just an additive bonus, which is not ideal given Haru's high multipliers. When using the combo version of Anchor Shot, the additive bonuses are more effective though. Overall, this is her best free-to-play option. The other 4-star partner is intended for strikers with low cost cards. The additive 10% bonus damage for 1 cost cards can benefit Haru when using the combo version of Power Charge for an AoE centered deck, otherwise it doesn't apply to her kit at all. Then, using a skill card grants a stacking 10% card damage bonus for 1 turn. Here, Anchor Shot has a base multiplier of 330%. When using Lift Anchor, a stack of Poltergeist is gained. When inspecting Anchor Shot's new multiplier, we can see that this bonus is additive as well. Since the bonus is capped at 30%, it is less effective than Ritoshka when running a team with high cost cards. The ego skill provides AoE damage and draws one of the character's attack cards costing 1 or less. Unfortunately, this doesn't work for Haru at all, since even her Power Charge combo variant would first have to activate its effect before its cost gets lowered. Her 5-star signature partner grants 25% bonus damage for 2 cost or higher cards, and 10% bonus damage for cards with Pulverize. From this description it's hard to tell whether these are additive or multiplicative effects, so let's find out. Here, Anchor Shot shows a multiplier of 370%. We can see in the deck info that the base multiplier of the card is 300%. Inspecting the currently held gear, we see the cube which grants an additive 15% bonus and a weapon that doesn't affect us here. Thus, putting everything together, we can infer that the 25% bonus for high cost cards is additive, while the 10% bonus for pulverized cards is multiplicative. Then, the ego skill provides a stacking damage buff based on the total cost of cards in hand. Similarly to the 4-star counterpart, this effect favors lineups built around expensive costs such as celestial cards. Here, the sum of the card costs is 7. By playing non-zero cost cards, you're reducing the effectiveness of the skill, so you want to activate it before using any cards. Now at 6 stacks, we're gaining a bonus of 120% for the next attack. Anchor Shot is still at 370% before activation. Once used, Anchor Shot is at 490%, demonstrating that this bonus is again additive. Since it gets consumed with the attack, it best works with the combo variant of Anchor Shot. Overall, her signature partner is a reasonable improvement over the best 4-star option, but at the same time nothing game changing. When the ego effect is fully stacked, you're gaining 140% more additive damage over the 3 morale stacks from Ritoshka. However, this only applies to a single attack, so it doesn't outperform the team-wide 60% damage bonus in every situation. For free-to-play and low spenders, I wouldn't recommend pulling for a partner as it's not worth the extra investment, but getting it from the shop is fine, if only for the higher stats. A strong 5-star alternative is Priscilla from the Battle Pass. It grants unconditional 8% bonus damage, plus another 25% against broken targets. I don't have the weapon to test these effects, but my guess is that they are multiplicative. The Ego skill is particularly noteworthy, as it both deals damage and grants weakness attack to one of Haru's cards for the low cost of 2 EP. When using this skill, you'd have to make sure that there's no power charge in hand, but otherwise it's an extremely potent effect against type-neutral opponents. The other 5-star partners are tailored to their respective characters and aren't worth obtaining just for Haru. Marianne is Malin's signature partner and poorly suited for Haru as the effect buffs basic cards, which Haru wants to remove from her deck. The 15% bonus damage against broken targets is fine, but weaker than the Battle Pass alternative. Scarlet is made for Rin and rewards you for only playing attack cards from the same character. I don't have the weapon to test the bonuses, but my guess is that they are additive. If Focus turns out to be multiplicative, it would be a potent buff for Haru, potentially competing with her signature partner, albeit more restrictive. That said, this wouldn't work well in lineups featuring Calip, as her Vulture ejections count as active attacks even if triggered via Celestial. Haru's Memory Fragment setup most commonly combines the 4-set line of Justice for 20% bonus crit rate and Executioner's Tool for 25% additional crit damage. Note that the crit rate bonus doesn't apply to her Ego skill and is also lost when running an AoE focus deck with the combo version of Power Charge. As an alternative, you could run multiple 2-sets, again including Executioner's Tool, as well as Blackwing for 12% bonus attack, and perhaps Cursed Corpse if you have a method of applying Agony to the targets. Besides a teammate that has a debuff in their kit, this can be achieved via items or Divine Epiphanies. For the main stats, the ideal slot should have crit rate, unless you're overcapping, in which case you switch to crit damage. The Desire slot should have Justice damage, and the Imagination slot attack percentage. The substats follow the same logic. Try to maximize attack and crit, and avoid special stats like extra damage or damage over time. As for Haru's potential nodes, you should focus upgrading her unique card damage, which grants a multiplicative increase of her Anchor Shot and Power Charge multipliers. Obviously, you also want to max out her crit nodes. Avoid upgrades that target her basic cards, in particular the upper one, which is unnecessary and extremely expensive. The other node targets Anchor Shot, providing up to 20% bonus damage. According to Pridewin, this bonus may be additive though. If that turns out to be true, I'd say this is a waste of resources, but if it is multiplicative, it's decent enough, granting an effective increase of about 70% to Anchor Shot's multiplier. Next, I'll just mention Haru's first upgrade, in case anyone considers pulling more or intends to spend their first universal dupe on her. This increases Lift Anchor's damage bonus from 70 to 100%. Since the bonus is multiplicative, you can expect an effective increase of Anchor Shot's multiplier by about 100%, depending on its epiphany. It's better than a lot of other 5-star dupes and you can't go wrong with more damage, but I wouldn't waste any resources on obtaining this. Finally, let's discuss team compositions. Due to Haru's high cost cards, she is reliant on a battery who supplies additional AP. Outside of Divine Epiphanies, the only currently available character to do this reliably is Mika. Therefore, the two of them are glued together until a new shiny 5-star support gets released, who relieves Mika of her duty. The third position is more flexible and can either go to another dedicated support character or my personal preference, someone with Celestial cards. As of now, this most likely is Calip, though Amir has access to the effect via her epiphanies as well. Calip, however, is the more offensive choice as she provides shielding, tenacity break and considerable AoE damage. Since her cards are mostly fired off alongside Haru's nukes, she's an extremely cost-effective addition to the lineup that compensates for Haru's specialization on single target damage. Ideally, you'd want multiple copies of Vulture Ejection in Calip's deck to maximize their synergy. Keep in mind though that the discard version of Haru's Anchor Shot doesn't synergize with this lineup. By using Anchor Shot, cards get discarded before the activation of Celestial. Then, Cassius offers generic support via his ability to cycle the deck quickly. Most notably, you will want his Pop-Eyed Popper upgrade, which lets you choose the full house quest, as well as copies of his zero-cost Devil Dice, so that you get to draw until all of Haru's relevant cards are in hand. This ensures that Haru gets to continuously fire off her buffed up nukes, though again requiring Mika as battery support. Next, a noteworthy amplifier is to this creature, though I hesitate to bring it up lest I send my Korean viewers into a frenzy. Aside from his ability to apply vulnerability at 0 cost, which is the strongest debuff in the game, he also has an upgrade for Wind Charge that grants an additional hit to the next attack card played. It lowers the final damage by 25% of that attack, so you're only getting 150% of the original damage, rather than doubling the impact, but it's still a considerable damage increase. Aside from vulnerability, we don't have other means to apply multiplicative damage bonuses, so he, who shall remain nameless, is a standout choice. If you want to build a team around just this damage, Beryl is a reasonable choice. She provides extra draws via her card Guilty Pleasure, though you'd need extra copies of it to make her earn the spot. She can also delay the use of her attacks due to the retain effect, allowing her to take the backseat while Haru hugs the spotlight. Finally, if in doubt, Veronica can slot into practically every lineup. She is AP efficient, provides bonus damage via her extra attacks, and helps cycling the deck. You honestly can never go wrong with her. That brings us to the end of this video. There was a lot of ground to cover. Hopefully, I didn't lose too many viewers along the way. Since this was my first CZN character guide, I'm interested in your feedback. Let me know if you feel there's something missing, or if parts should be shortened. In any case, I won't hold you any longer. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.